Hi, everybody. Ron Placone here. So, over in Baltimore, there have been protests in relation to the death of Freddie Gray. Freddie, of course, was the young black man who was chased by police. Apparently, he made eye contact with a police officer, and I guess that's enough to be a suspect in pursuit. So, he ran, the police ran after him. And as they sustained him, he sustained some injuries while they were putting him in custody, and he later died. There's a lot of questions around this, and there have been a lot of protests because many feel that this was an unjust situation. And now I'm not talking about that issue specifically right now. More so, I'm talking about what happened to J.M. Giordano, a photographer for the Baltimore City paper that was at one of these protests, attending them, and was beaten by police. It's unclear, at least to me, it's unclear what this guy did for the police to start beating him. I don't know. It seems like he was just doing his job. There's a video that surfaced online, and it's a video of the police, and they are just beating this guy. He's on the ground. They're beating him. And you hear somebody off camera who had the camera. I mean, he's not in the shot. And I'm assuming that's the person that was witching him, yelling, he's a photographer, he's press, he's a photographer, he's press, trying to get them to stop. And of course, they were not stopping, at least not throughout the course of the video. They were continually beating this man. And it was just an utter instance of total confusion. It was pretty brutal to watch. And I think everybody there and the person shooting the video was surely confused. The one thing that confused me a little bit was, okay, he's a photographer, he's press. Does that mean if he wasn't a photographer, it would have been okay to be beating this person? Like, I think no matter what they do, but the police should not have been beating the crap out of this person the way that they were in the video. But they were beating this photographer. And what this really, the biggest problem here is, as of recent, with everything that's been going on from Ferguson until present, there's such an insane importance, maybe now more than ever before, on citizen journalism and on local journalism. Because, I mean, think about Charleston, what happened there, where there was one person that had a camera. So now at least people know what actually happened, and they found out that the police story was totally bogus. And hopefully, you know, this officer is going to be going to jail in the Charleston case. So now more than ever, it's important for bystanders and citizens and journalists on the local level to really get these stories out there and really make sure people know the truth. Because the media at the corporate level has a reputation, and deservedly so, of not being the most accommodating when it comes to movements and when it comes to protests. Why is that? Because the main corporate media is kind of happy with the status quo, right? Our media at the corporate level is concerned with upholding the status quo because they are benefiting from it, and the people that own them are also benefiting from it as well. And nothing challenges the status quo more than a social movement or a protest, because a protest is when a group of people gather together and they're saying as a group, the status quo is not working anymore. Something is not right in our populace right now. Something's wrong, and we're doing something about it. That's what a protest is. That's what a social movement is. So the media, starting with the SDS in the 60s, and you can trace it to almost every movement you can think of. The same applies for Occupy, whatever. Usually they will at first trivialize a movement, and then they will then marginalize it. Once it becomes so big that it can't be ignored, they'll marginalize the movement, or they'll just kind of focus on the bad apples. And you saw that happen with Occupy. It was just, oh, it's just a bunch of people, whatever, it's nothing. Then all of a sudden it got so big they couldn't pay attention to it. So what did they do? They didn't focus on Noam Chomsky, or they didn't focus on all the artists and musicians and activists and all these different people coming together, exchanging ideas. They focused on the person dressed up like a tent. Right. And that's just one example. You always see that happen when it comes to movements and when it comes to protests. The same happened in Ferguson and all the protests. It wasn't, you know, they didn't focus on the ideas. They didn't focus on the call for better engagement. They focused on the few bad apples that were chanting for dead cops and stuff like that, and the people that were actually doing violent things. That's what the focus was on. It wasn't focused on, you know, the many people that weren't doing that stuff. And so when you have somebody at the local level that wants to, be a part of things, that wants to capture things, that wants to tell this story, and they're beaten by police for doing their jobs. I mean, that's just, the big media theory debate is who was closer to being correct here, George Orwell or Aldous Huxley. And this is a case where certainly George Orwell is right. This is nothing short of Orwellian. When somebody is trying to get the truth and somebody is trying to capture something on camera and they're part of the press, it's their right to be there. In fact, not only is it their right, it's their obligation. They have an obligation to the populace to get this content out there, and they are beaten by police officers. This is scary. This shows a red flag towards the Baltimore police force, towards just a society in general, where something like this can go on. And I know that this is just one, unfortunately, this is just one of many, many things that have been going on as of recent. I know this is just a small drop in the bucket when you think about the Ferguson protests, where when cops first hit the scene, they were going at people with their guns already pointed at people, which anyone with any kind of training whatsoever will tell you, you don't do that. You only point your weapon when you want to shoot it. But people were walking around with their guns pointed at people holding up signs. It's a kind of scary environment. And when you see stuff like this, you just really think, man, something is not right. There has been a true overreach by law enforcement that's going on in this country. And unfortunately, the trend does not seem to be diminishing at all. In fact, it keeps on escalating to the point now where even people in the press just aren't safe. They can't even be there because you might take a picture that somebody doesn't like and a group of cops are going to come and start beating the crap out of you. This is a disturbing trend. And I don't know what's going to happen at this point. I mean, you really thought that we were going to start maybe more civically engaging each other and maybe diplomatically starting to address these issues. But it seems like we take one step forward and then take another couple steps backwards. And this is another example of a few steps backwards. And I think the inevitable first step, and I've talked about this before, but the inevitable first step, we have to get all law enforcement, every single law enforcement in this country should be wearing a body camera. For the protection of citizens and for the protection of officers too. There should be a body camera on at all times to at least attempt to diminish some of the abuse that's been going on. So we'll see what happens there, but it's really scary when you see something this Orwellian occur when there's people on the local level that are trying to tell a story that needs to be told. This is Ron Placone signing out.